Hi guys, today we're going to talk a little bit about Apex REST callouts. In our previous video, we created custom Apex REST web services. Today, we're going to actually consume a custom REST web service which Trailhead has created. We're going to consume it from Apex. We're going to do both a get and a post and show the results of each. This is the Trailhead API hosted on Heroku, and when I actually navigate to it on my browser, these are the results. As you can see, some JSON gets spat out with a collection called animals, and you've got 4 animals in the collection. Think of the Apex as the block on the left, hosted on Salesforce. The request will originate from the Apex, call the web service hosted on Heroku. A response will come back, be put into memory in a collection in Apex. Let's have a look at the Apex class that does the get and the posts. Your first method, which is called makeGETCallout, instantiates a new instance of the HTTP class, creates a new instance of the HTTP request class. The request's endpoint is set to the Trailhead Heroku hosted REST web service. We set the method that we're going to send to get, and we instantiate a new instance of HTTP response, which we then assign to the sending of that request with the HTTP object. If the request is successful, and we do this by checking the status code of the response, which is 200, we deserialize untyped the body which we received back from the response, which would be this. We then get the first instance of the map, which is called animals, and we pass those animals into a list of objects. We then do a system debug, and we loop through all those animals in the animals map and debug each animal. So if you look at the results, it will get this map, and then it will do a system debug on each and every animal in the JSON. The method also then returns the HTTP response that we received when we sent this request. One thing you'll need to keep in mind is that you'll need to authorize that Heroku URL in order to hit it. So on remote site settings under setup, click new remote site, click in a name. I'm going to call it Trailhead Heroku, and I'm going to put the URL which we're going to hit to authorize it. Once that's done, let's head back to the developer console and run this method from the execute anonymous window. I'm calling the static method makeGetCallout, and I'm assigning it to a HTTP response. If I execute, you'll see a success in the log. The previous request I made was unauthorized, as I had to authorize that remote endpoint under remote site settings. If we open the log, we'll see all the animals being debugged onto the debug log. Let's check out the post callout now. We're going to call it makePOSTCallout, pretty much the same as the makeGetCallout. We create a new instance of the HTTP object. We create a new instance of the HTTP request object. We point to the same web service. This time we set the method as post. We set a header for the content type to JSON, as we're going to pass some data through to the web service. We're actually going to send data to the web service now. We set the body to determine what JSON we're going to send the web service, and just like the previous example, we create a HTTP response by sending that request through with the HTTP object we instantiate. If the status code is not a 201, we do a debug with the status and the error that occurred. Otherwise, we just debug the body of the response that we get. Similarly to the other method, we also return the HTTP response. If we run the makePOSTCallout method from the execute anonymous window, we get another success. If we open the logs, check the debug logs, and we'll see that Mighty Moose is a new item which we added in our code over here. That in a nutshell is how to make get HTTP requests and post HTTP requests from Apex to REST services. Now, as you may or may not know, in order to create tests for these types of classes, one needs to create mocks for the HTTP responses, as you cannot make HTTP requests within tests classes. You can either go the route of the static resource callout mock, or you can go the route of implementing the HTTP callout mock. For the static resource callout mock, you create a new instance of the static resource callout mock, and you set its static resource to a static resource which you create. The static resource needs to be of MIME type text plain, and it will contain the results of the HTTP response that you expect. You can also set the status code, in this case to 200, and the header. You then set the tests mock to the mock you just created, and the first parameter would be the HTTP callout mock class. You can then proceed to make the callout within the test, and the result which you set up in your mock will be returned. You can then perform a whole bunch of asserts based on what was returned by the HTTP response as well as its status code. You can also set asserts on the header which you set earlier, and obviously you can deserialize the JSON which you returned to a map just like we did in our previous example, and do an assert on all the objects which are returned. For the HTTP callout mock, it works slightly different. You'll create a new class which implements the HTTP callout mock interface. You'll then create a respond method which takes in a parameter of the HTTP request, and you will formulate the response that you expect back when you run the HTTP request in your test class. So in your actual test class, you will set the mock with the first parameter being the same as the static resource callout mock. It will be HTTP callout mockout class, and the second parameter will be a new instance of the class you just created with the response that you expect. You make the call to the method which makes a request to the endpoint, and then you'll be able to receive the response exactly the way that you set it up in your class, which implements the HTTP callout mock. So as you can see here, these are retrieving all the pieces of information which you set up in your HTTP callout mock class. You can also see an assert of the JSON which came back. It's the same as the JSON which you set up in your animals HTTP callout mock. And that is how you call REST web services from Apex and retrieve their results. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe to be notified of my next video.